Hey guys, so what's been happening in the hobby this week? Well, I thought we'd have a little bit of a discussion on, I guess, inspiration, or maybe lore or things that inspire you not only for the paint scheme itself, but the way you paint. So last week I was talking about like single figure to batch painting, like, the differences there, and how you might vary it up to improve your hobby workflow and just general enjoyment of the hobby. And this week sort of follows on from a bit of that idea, but moving more into, I guess, what inspires you to paint the army in the first place, and also how that might help dictate the way you paint it, to improve your enjoyment of it and all of that type of stuff, and maybe come up with some more unique ways of painting to keep things interesting over the course of the time you're painting that army. So with a heavily, I guess, slant on chaos, because that's what this talk, I guess, is about, is stuff to do with chaos. And so yeah, let's get into it. So over the last couple of weeks, I was listening to the audiobook from Black Library's Eye of Terror. It's a really old book. There's a YouTuber that's doing like audio readings, like audiobook readings of a lot of literature from Black Library and so on. He's called A Border Prince or something. So yeah, go check that out. The audiobook's there. It's like 11 hours long or something, I think. But Eye of Terror is a really cool book. It's an early book that's sort of in the days when, I guess that was early 2000s, when they were still trying to figure out, what chaos is like. And this is a 40k book, but even if you're, as I've got here in front of me, some AOS stuff, even if you're doing AOS or 40k, this book really gives you a good sense of what chaos is really like. And I think that's something that's interesting, in a style of writing in a way that was still pretty open. There's a lot of interesting concepts in that book, and quite a lot of adult concepts in that book, which I doubt would be in many 40k books these days. But there's some certain little things that are said in that book that allude to some quite heavy concepts, which I'm sure parents with their kids wouldn't have wanted their kids reading that stuff. But it slipped in. I don't think these days games would allow those kind of lines in. But some pretty heavy things. So I won't mention it here. But if you listen to that story and you hear some things to do with, I guess, what chaos expects of you, and the certain sacrifices that they'll expect for certain members of your village or your clan or whatever, and they explain the offerings that have to be made, and yeah, they're pretty brutal. It's pretty brutal. So yeah, I'll leave that for you to find out in the Eye of Terror book. But you wouldn't get a line like that of explaining what exactly the sacrifices are, what those villagers have to do to placate their demon prince or their god. It's pretty brutal, and gives you some of the stark reality of how these people live. But in that book, it goes into it's basically a story about a group of people entering the Eye of Terror, and a rogue trader, or not really a rogue trader, but he's I guess a kind of trader, and he has a navigator with him, and they're going into the Eye. This won't spoil anything, by the way. And they meet a certain other trader, and you just get to experience what the Eye of Terror is like. And it's a part of space that is melding with the warp and with chaos. So it's both got the unreal and the real together, and so it makes all the planets just oozing chaos and just changing them and making them really interesting. And some of the early ideas of chaos, that individualism, the fact that every chaos follower is like vying for demonhood, a character in their own right. They're not just a part of the group. They're all trying to be the favored of their god. And that's an idea that can get lost a little bit when you're playing games and making armies and doing all that, and these color schemes that you try to do where everything is kind of the same. You kind of lose a little bit of that. You can do conversions to influence that. You can do those things, but some of the earlier times in Games Workshop, when you look at some of those early armies, in a lot of those early Chaos armies, they're so different, they're so unique, the individual models are so varied from one another, and the paint schemes are as well, and it's very vibrant, and I feel like that's something that maybe is lost these days a little bit. It's more homogenized, and this book really gives you a sense of that individuality, and so you get to see the way the followers live naturally on these worlds, and the power that the demons have in a part of space which is so broken and so easily manipulated. You get to see what a greater demon can really do, and the fact that they can literally change their size to be larger than solar systems, than planets and all that stuff, and hover around in space above them and just flick them and destroy a planet in the blink of an eye. And this type of power that these greater demons can have, and that they're gods in their own right, and that people are praying to them and vying for their favor, and the kind of gifts that are given, and all of that type of stuff, and the brutal reality of it, and just the endless war that goes on with these chaos gods, and how they don't get along at all. They're very polar opposite of each other, and you get a sense of all of that, and that just like inspires, so if you're looking for chaos and looking for some inspiration, definitely give that audio a read, or get the book if you can get it still, and have a read of it. It's just super cool, and it really gets you into that mode. And so that's where we move to with this individualism. And so I really wanted to, so I'm doing this Blight Kings army, this Nurgle army, and so I decided, what, I really want to tap into that early days of Games Workshop and the way they saw chaos back then, which is, each model is kind of like a champion or a character, and everything's vibrant and interesting, and colors, and and just mutable. Everything's changing all the time. Just a really unique vibe. There's a planet in there that's like in the shape of a rose, and all of the planets within the cluster of planets are all roses. All the suns are roses with petals and so on. And the chaos people live on these on the petal folds that come out of the stem and so on. It's really interesting, and it gives you a sense of like what it can be, like what those worlds can be. You have another world that like where the water you can breathe, and it's like it fills up and goes away, and there's all this like strange stuff, and the kinds of strange creatures and characters that live in these places, and think of that as totally normal. It's just great, and it really gets you in the mode. So for this AOS army, I've just finished this Blight King here, which there should be a tutorial now finished on my channel if you want to check out how this was done. But the idea is that I want to paint these guys all individually, one by one. So it'll be the first time in like my whole hobby life that I'm going to try to paint an army one at a time, and not like do batch painting, like a little bit of like painting off and on different ones, but treating each one as an individual model and painting it that way. So I'm not doing like all the greens on there, all the flesh on there, and I'm not sticking to the same colors either. So the way you might say, oh, how do you keep the army homogenized, or at least having a unified finish? Well, that's to pick, I guess, a color palette or a hue range of colors that you're going to stick with, and then you can vary up how much of each is going to be on each model, and in what amounts and so on. So you'll still get a harmonious finish, and I'll show you that here with the one at the back. But I think it's a really interesting way to do it, and picking an army that's more elite, like some of these Chaos armies can be, I think that's a really good one to do, and it also means that, like, for a lot of these models, they're so beautiful, I don't really want to convert them. They're really lovely as they are, and so the way to get that individual look about them as opposed to someone else's army is through the paint job, and I think that really gives you a nice challenge, and it gives you a nice refreshment every time you come to a new model. It's like a new palette. You can try something new, you can test new techniques, and it's going to fit in because you're picking that range of colors. So as you can see here with this one, I'm picking a lot of green and blues and purple yellows, but they're all coming from one side of the spectrum, I guess. and then using the contrasting color as like the secondary or the spot color. And so you're playing around with that sort of variety, and I think that's going to help, and it should all fit together, especially, you know, with Chaos. It just will, like, it's not going to look out of place. And I think that's one of the benefits of doing a Chaos army. You can really do something like this and have it still feel unified. So if we have a look here, you know, I've started, this one's going to have black armor, but it's got blues in it. You can't really see too well on this, but I've managed to get sort of this like blue-green hue going through the armor, and you know, that's going to mimic a lot of what's happening over here. Not as heavy, but you're going to see it, and I'll slowly work that up with more glazes to saturate it, and you'll get that nice pop of color there. And even the skin wasn't done the same way. If we look here, one's a bit paler, one's a bit yellower. He still has a bit more to go, but you know, ultimately the colors are going to be different, but they're going to fit together, I think, overall. And it's just something fun to try. And with an army like this, if you're going to try this type of concept, you're probably only looking at about 40 models or so. You know, most of these elite armies, something like that, maybe a few more. But that's not that bad, you know. This is, again, incidentally, like a secondary project, so it's not your main army to do this kind of challenge on. You're doing it on maybe a secondary army. So, you know, in between doing sort of more batch painting stuff with some of your other armies, you can have one of these on the go and get that done over a week or whatever. You know, 40 odd models, you know, in a year you'll have basically a painted army, and that's going to be great, right? And before you know it, you'll just look there and you'll have all these unique models that you can test, you know, techniques on and build with, and that's going to really improve your painting as well. And when you go to field them, they're all going to be these unique chaos warriors that are all trying to become gods in their own right. It's going to look really great. Well, at least I think so anyway. I think that'll be really cool, especially for maybe some of the armies benefit more from this, right? So Nurgle obviously benefits a lot, but I think one of the ones that really benefits from this would be Tzeentch, because of just the rainbow color hue that Tzeentch has. I think you could do some really, really fun stuff with a Tzeentch army with this type of concept. I mean, the others work too. Slaanesh will work very well, and so would Khorne. But yeah, I feel like the one that works best, I guess, is either Nurgle or Tzeentch, just because of the color range that already exists within the essence of what they are. You get such a good variety there, and the models are so interesting in terms of the surface of them, the sculptural surface. You've got a lot to work with, and so I think those two gods are probably the ones that will, you know, get you the best results with this type of technique. The other two are more sort of mono-focused, and that includes their color palette, tends to be a bit that as well. But not so much Slaanesh, but definitely Khorne has a very particular look, and you can get variety, but it's not as great as what you might get with some of these others. And so I think that, yeah, if you're doing a Nurgle Tzeentch one, it's going to get the best results. Slaanesh probably the next one, and then probably Khorne the last in that lot, just because of the color range that exists for Khorne. You can do definitely other colors, and that would actually that's what I would probably try to do, is try to find other color combinations that might work for Khorne, that will give you some variety. But you've got to try to keep it within a range, otherwise it will get too out of balance too quickly. So yeah, but you know, that's my thoughts on that. I think it's going to be a really nice challenge, and over the coming months and so on, I'll definitely do some little showcase stuff and show how I'm going with this, and maybe come back to this topic again once I've done a few more and some of my thoughts on it. But I really feel like it's a great way to do it, especially for Chaos. And you know, getting into the lore of something, you know, finding a book that speaks to you that may not even be a Games Workshop book, but just trying to find some background that helps inspire you to push your color schemes, to push the way you approach the army, I think is a really great thing, and something that everyone should, at least at one stage or another for one of their armies, at least indulge in, because it's just such a wonderful part of this hobby, the way you can combine all those elements together and bring it into something that ends up in a, you know, in a little painted model like this that you get to enjoy. Yeah, it's just a great thing to do, so I highly recommend it. So yeah, that's all I got to say on this topic this week. Hope you've enjoyed it. Please, you know, subscribe, all that stuff if you've liked it, and yeah, I guess I'll catch you on the next one.